Good evening, dear friends. Before we begin this story, I want to welcome each one of you who has gathered here tonight. Whether you're ending a long day, carrying a heavy heart, or simply seeking a moment of peace before sleep, I'm grateful you're here. Tonight's story begins with a simple truth. Even when life feels uncertain, God invites us into a deeper peace than the world could ever offer. A peace not based on circumstances, but on His faithful presence. So settle in, breathe slowly, and let your heart rest as this reflection unfolds. There was once a man named Elias who had spent much of his life running from noise, chaos, and the fears that once shaped him. He was not a weak man, but a tired one. A man who had learned to survive storms through sheer determination, yet never quite learned how to rest in the quiet afterward. Every evening he would stand by the window of his small apartment and look over the city lights, trying to release the weight on his chest, but the peace he longed for never seemed to stay long enough. On a cool November night, after a day filled with unexpected setbacks, Elias found himself restless. His heart felt like a room filled with scattered thoughts, some painful, some confusing, some simply loud. He tried to distract himself with tasks, but the heaviness stayed. He finally stepped outside and began walking aimlessly through the dimly lit streets, letting the cool air calm his warm, anxious breath. The world around him moved slowly, almost as if the entire city was sighing with him. He walked until he reached an old park where he used to sit with his father years ago. The benches were worn, the trees nearly bare, and the night sky stretched endlessly overhead. As he sat down, he thought about how much his life had shifted over the years. His childhood had been filled with certainty, routines, and rituals that anchored him. But adulthood had not been gentle. Job instability, broken relationships, and a string of unexpected losses had slowly chipped away at his confidence. He had moments of strength, yes, but also long stretches of exhaustion. And tonight felt like one of those stretches. He leaned back against the bench and closed his eyes, wishing for even a moment of peace. He didn't know how to put the feeling into words, but what he wanted was something simple: the ability to rest without being chased by thoughts he couldn't control. After sitting there for a long time, he opened his eyes just in time to see an elderly man slowly approaching with a walking stick. His steps were deliberate, but not frail. He had an air of calmness around him, something Elias noticed instantly because it was the exact opposite of how he felt. The man nodded kindly as he passed, but then paused as if sensing the heaviness around Elias. "Long day?" the man asked softly. Elias offered a tired smile. "Long season, actually." The old man lowered himself onto the bench beside him. "Funny thing about seasons," he said, "they feel endless when you're in them, but once they pass, you wonder how you ever believed they would last forever." Elias let those words settle. Something about the man's presence felt strangely familiar, as though he carried a wisdom earned through weathering storms of his own. They talked for a while, gently and without pressure. The man shared small stories of his life, not dramatic or extraordinary, just simple, real experiences of hardship and resilience. He spoke of storms at sea during his younger years, nights spent fighting waves that towered over the ship, and days when he wasn't sure if the sun would rise again. But each story carried the same message. Fear does not define a person. What they cling to does. Eventually, the man told Elias about the scripture in Acts, the moment Paul finally reached Rome after surviving storm after storm. "Do you know what amazes me about Paul?" he said. "Not the miracles, not the courage, not even the suffering. What amazes me is the peace he carried. Peace that didn't depend on where he was or what he was facing. Whether shipwrecked or imprisoned, he stayed rooted." Elias nodded slowly. "I've never understood how someone can have peace in the middle of chaos." The old man smiled as though he had been waiting for that question. "It's because peace doesn't come from the outside. It comes from what you hold on the inside. Circumstances are loud, but God speaks in a whisper. And if you don't steady your heart, you'll miss His voice." Elias felt something shift inside him, a gentle pull toward understanding. "I've been trying to control everything around me," he admitted. "Maybe that's why I feel like I'm drowning." "That's usually how it happens," the man replied. "You try to calm the sea instead of trusting the one who walks on it." A quiet wind moved through the trees, carrying away the tension in the air. Elias felt himself breathing deeper, slower. The old man stood and stretched. "You're carrying too much," he said softly. "Let it go, just for tonight. God can handle what you were never meant to hold alone." Elias looked up at him, wanting to ask more. But before he could speak, the man smiled warmly and added, "Rest well. Tomorrow will bring its own light." And with that, he walked slowly down the path, disappearing into the shadows as quietly as he had arrived. Elias stayed on the bench long after the man left. His mind felt clearer, steadier, as though someone had opened a window inside his heart. He wasn't suddenly free from worry, but for the first time in a long time, he felt something close to ease. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and whispered a few simple words he hadn't prayed in months. "God, take this. I can't sleep with all this weight." It wasn't a perfect prayer. It wasn't eloquent, but it was sincere. And something inside him loosened, as if the act of surrender opened a space for peace to step in. He allowed himself to imagine Paul in chains, walking into Rome not with fear, but with absolute calm. A man who had every reason to break, yet chose trust instead. A man whose peace had nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with faith. The park lights flickered softly, and Elias made his way back home. When he reached his apartment, the city felt quieter, and his heart felt lighter. For the first time in weeks, he believed that maybe, just maybe, peace was not something impossible to find. As he prepared for bed, he whispered one final thought into the silence. "Lord, help me learn to be steady, not because life is gentle, but because you are." That night, Elias drifted into the deepest sleep he'd had in months. The next morning, Elias woke with a clarity that surprised him. The sunlight had barely touched the edges of his curtains, yet something within him felt lighter, as though the knots inside his chest had loosened overnight. He stayed still for a moment, letting the quiet rest over him before the rest of the world rushed in. It was strange how a single conversation with a stranger could settle parts of him he didn't know were unsettled. As he prepared for the day, he found himself remembering the old man's words, the gentle wisdom woven into every sentence. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but it felt like a lifeline given to him at the exact moment he needed one. Throughout the day, Elias noticed moments where he would normally tense up. Traffic delays, unexpected emails, conversations that felt vague and draining. But instead of collapsing under the familiar wave of frustration, something in him remained anchored. He wasn't suddenly unshakable, but he wasn't drowning either. It felt like the inside of him had shifted from storm to steady water. That sense of steadiness carried him until evening, when the words of the elderly man echoed again. Peace doesn't come from the outside. As the day ended, Elias found himself drawn back to the park. The sky was darker this time, clouds gathering overhead, and the air smelled faintly of rain. He walked to the same old bench and sat down, letting the memories of the night before wash over him. He wondered if the stranger would appear again, but he also knew not to rely on that hope. Some encounters are meant to happen once, just enough to plant a seed. He closed his eyes and took a slow breath. The world was quieter than usual, just the soft hum of distant traffic and the rustling of dry leaves in the wind. Elias let his mind drift, thinking about the seasons of life that felt endless until they suddenly changed without warning. He had been in a long season of unrest, unable to find internal balance no matter how many self-help books he bought or routines he forced himself into. But peace had never been a discipline to master. It had always been a presence to receive. It wasn't long before he sensed someone approaching. When he opened his eyes, he saw a young boy standing a few feet away, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, wearing a jacket much too big for him. The boy looked troubled, glancing around as if searching for someone. Elias straightened and gently asked if he was lost. The boy hesitated, then shook his head. "Waiting for my mom," he murmured. "She's finishing work nearby." Elias nodded, offering a small smile. He remembered being young and waiting alone, how the smallest shadows felt larger when you didn't know when a familiar face would return. The boy sat down at the far end of the bench, hugging his knees to his chest. They sat together in silence for a few minutes, sharing the stillness. "Do you come here a lot?" the boy asked suddenly. "Not really," Elias replied. "Only when my mind is full." The boy nodded as though he understood completely. "My mind gets full too," he said. "Sometimes I think too much, and then I can't sleep." Those words hit Elias in a way he didn't expect. The innocence of them, the simplicity. He had spent years trying to outrun the weight of overthinking, and now here was a child who already felt that burden. He felt a pang of sadness for the boy, but also an odd sense of companionship. Maybe overthinking wasn't a flaw, but a sign of a soul that felt deeply. "What do you do when that happens?" Elias asked. The boy shrugged. "My grandma used to tell me something. She said when my heart gets too loud, I should tell God about it before I go to sleep. She said God hears even whispers." Elias felt that sentence run through him like a warm current. God hears even whispers. It was a truth he knew but had forgotten in the noise of adulthood. The boy's mother arrived a short while later, apologizing breathlessly and thanking Elias for keeping her son company. They walked away and Elias watched them disappear down the path. He wondered how many people crossed this park every day, carrying burdens they didn't know how to name. How many whispered prayers drifted into the night from tired hearts. He thought again about Paul in chains, greeting visitors in Rome with a calmness that defied everything around him. Peace was not the absence of struggle, it was the presence of a deeper anchor. Clouds gathered more thickly overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Elias stayed seated a little longer, letting the cool droplets touch his skin. There was something cleansing about rain at night, the way it softened the edges of the world and quieted the noise. He breathed deeply, feeling gratitude rise within him. Gratitude for small encounters, for whispered truths, for the mysterious ways God sent peace through unexpected messengers. The rain grew heavier, and Elias finally stood to leave. As he walked home, he realized something. Peace didn't have to be dramatic. It didn't have to be a sudden revelation or a miraculous transformation. Sometimes peace arrives slowly, like rain seeping into dry soil, filling the cracks quietly until the earth softened again. Sometimes peace came through strangers, on a bench, or a child's innocent wisdom. And sometimes peace came simply because he dared to pause long enough to listen. When he reached his apartment, he wiped the rain from his face and stepped inside. The familiar space felt different tonight, as though someone had opened a window while he was gone and let fresh air in. He changed into dry clothes and sat on the edge of his bed, remembering the words of the elderly man and the boy. One had lived many storms, the other was just beginning to navigate them, and somehow between the two, Elias felt himself learning how to breathe again. As he prepared to sleep, he whispered softly into the dim room, "God, steady me again tonight." There was no performance in his words, no desperation this time, just a quiet confidence that the one who had steadied Paul, the one who heard whispered prayers from children, the one who met people in parks on ordinary evenings, was listening still. The rain pattered steadily outside, creating a rhythm that soothed his mind. Elias sank into his pillow, and for the second night in a row, he drifted into sleep with a sense of calm he hadn't known in years. A calm not shaped by perfect circumstances, but by the presence of a God who remained unshaken, even when the world trembled. The following days unfolded with a gentle rhythm Elias hadn't felt in a long time. The restlessness that once clung to him like a shadow seemed to loosen its grip with every quiet moment he allowed himself to be present. Peace did not flood him all at once. It drifted in slowly, like a quiet tide returning to shore after years of retreat. And he began to notice how different life appeared when he wasn't fighting every thought, every interruption, every emotion. He went to work and returned home with a steadiness that surprised even his co-workers. A few of them commented on how calm he seemed, But Elias simply smiled and shrugged. He wasn't sure how to explain that the change hadn't come from any achievement, any strategy, or any breakthrough, only from a quiet decision to stop carrying what wasn't his to hold. But with peace often comes testing, and Elias soon found himself facing a situation that challenged the very steadiness he was learning to cultivate. Near the end of the week, his supervisor called him into a meeting. There had been a mistake in a recent project, one that caused tension among their clients. Although Elias knew he hadn't been the one responsible, the blame was subtly being shifted toward him. Not explicitly, but in the tone, the phrasing, the gentle insinuations. In the past, Elias would have spiraled, hurt, anxious, defensive, and afraid. But instead of reacting, he sat quietly and listened. He felt the old patterns tugging at him, urging him to fight, to justify, to lash out. Yet the stranger's words and the boy's simple wisdom echoed through his mind. When your heart gets loud, tell God about it. Peace doesn't come from the outside. So Elias breathed slowly and spoke truthfully. Not defensively, not angrily, just honestly. The conversation didn't magically resolve everything, but something inside him stayed anchored. When he left the meeting room, he wasn't shaking with frustration as he once would have been. He wasn't replaying the conversation over and over in his mind. Instead, he walked to the restroom, locked himself in a stall, and whispered a quiet prayer for clarity and peace. Something he never would have thought to do before. That evening, Elias returned to the park. The sky was a soft gradient of blue and gray, and the air was cool enough to encourage deeper breaths. He sat on the familiar bench and let the weight of the day settle. He thought about Paul arriving in Rome, beginning again even after everything he had endured. Sometimes peace was choosing stillness exactly when life pushed hardest against it. Elias didn't know how long he sat there before he heard footsteps. He opened his eyes, half expecting the elderly man, but instead he saw a woman sitting down at the far end of the bench. She looked exhausted, hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes distant. Elias hadn't come here to talk, but something nudged him to acknowledge her, the same way the stranger had acknowledged him. "Rough day?" he asked gently. The woman exhaled shakily, as though someone had finally cracked open the door to her heart. She explained that she was caring for her mother, who had grown weaker in recent months. The burden of constant caretaking, the fear of losing her, and the weight of being the only one in the family who carried responsibility. It had begun to press on her in ways she couldn't voice to anyone else. Elias listened quietly. He didn't offer solutions, advice, or cliches. He simply let her speak, because he knew firsthand the healing found in being heard. When she finished, he shared a little of the wisdom he'd received, how some burdens are too heavy to carry alone, how peace comes from allowing God to hold what we cannot, and how strength often appears not in action, but in surrender. The woman's eyes softened as she spoke about her faith. She had begun forgetting how to trust, she admitted, worn down by exhaustion. But hearing Elias speak, she remembered something her mother used to say: "Peace comes when you stop trying to be the whole answer and simply become the one who trusts." They sat together for a long moment, the night deepening around them. The park lights flickered on, casting warm circles of light around their bench. Elias realized then that peace was not meant to be hoarded. It was meant to flow outward, to steady others the same way he had been steadied. When the woman eventually rose to leave, she thanked him with a gratitude that seemed to lift some of her heaviness. Elias watched her walk away and found himself silently praying for her strength, for her mother's comfort, for the quiet courage she would need in the coming days. When Elias stood to go, rain began falling again, not heavily, but softly, as though the sky was washing the city in a gentle rhythm. He walked home without rushing, letting the droplets cool his skin and quiet his mind. For the first time in years, he felt like part of something bigger than his struggle. Peace didn't mean everything was fixed. It meant he wasn't alone. Later that night, sitting by his bedroom window, Elias felt prompted to revisit the conversation with his supervisor. Not through worry, but through reflection. He realized something important. Peace was not the absence of injustice or misunderstanding. It was the inner grounding that prevented those things from consuming him. It was the ability to respond rather than react. It was choosing trust over turmoil. As he looked out at the glittering city lights, he whispered again the same small prayer. God, steady me. Not because tomorrow would be perfect, but because he wanted to meet tomorrow differently, not with fear, but with faith. The next day proved that this new path was necessary. His supervisor scheduled a follow-up meeting, and Elias went in with a calm he couldn't explain. This time, the atmosphere was different. Another co-worker had come forward, clarifying the situation. The supervisor, now understanding the truth, apologized for the miscommunication. And though the apology was brief, something shifted inside Elias. Not because he had been vindicated, but because he realized that he no longer needed people's approval to feel at peace. He had already given his turmoil to God before the outcome revealed itself. That evening, Elias returned to the park once more. The bench had become a kind of sacred place, a small sanctuary where peace seemed to settle more easily on his shoulders. This time he sat differently, not as a man searching for relief, but as a man learning to live gently again. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow through the branches. Elias thought of how much had changed in such a short time. Not around him, but within him. Peace had not removed his responsibilities, his challenges, or his uncertainties, but it had given him the strength to face them without losing himself. He realized then that perhaps peace was not something you discovered once, but something you chose again and again, like breathing or praying or trusting. And in that realization, he felt something deep within him settle for the first time in years. The wind moved through the trees with a whisper that sounded almost like reassurance. Elias leaned back on the bench, closed his eyes, and allowed the evening to wash over him like a quiet blessing. The following morning rose with a quiet softness, the kind of dawn that didn't rush in but unfolded gently, as though giving the world time to breathe before anything demanded its attention. Elias woke before his alarm, not out of anxiety as he once would have, but because something inside him felt steady, alert, and strangely expectant. He lay still for a moment, listening to the distant hum of the city waking up, and allowed himself to absorb the peaceful silence filling his room. Over the next several days, life continued with all its usual responsibilities and unpredictability. Work brought new projects, new deadlines, and the occasional friction that naturally arises in any environment filled with stressed people and shifting expectations. Yet Elias found himself responding differently each time. When tension rose, he breathed more slowly. When co-workers complained, he didn't absorb their frustration. When plans didn't unfold perfectly, he didn't spiral into fear. He simply paused, grounded himself, and gave space for peace to surface. It wasn't that he was becoming indifferent or detached. Quite the opposite. He was becoming more present, more able to see clearly what mattered, more able to let go of what didn't. And it was only when he lived from this place of interior calm that he began noticing how deeply others around him longed for the same peace. One afternoon, just as Elias was leaving work, he encountered a young intern standing by the elevator, visibly shaken. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to hold herself together, insisting she was fine when clearly she wasn't. Elias recognized the familiar signs: the tightened jaw, the rapid breaths, the desperate effort to appear composed. He gently asked if she was all right, and at first she resisted. But eventually she admitted she had made a mistake on an important client file and was terrified of the consequences. Elias listened with patience. The same gift the woman in the park had needed, the same gift the stranger had given him. He reassured her that mistakes didn't define her, that fear magnified problems that were smaller in reality, and that owning the error with humility would likely earn more respect than trying to hide it. The young intern wiped her eyes, steadied her breathing, and thanked him before walking back into the office with a courage she hadn't possessed minutes earlier. As Elias exited the building, he realized something profound. Peace isn't passive, it's powerful. It moves quietly, but it moves deeply. And when one person chooses peace, that choice touches others like ripples traveling across a still pond. That evening, Elias felt drawn back to the park one more time, not out of desperation, but out of gratitude. The air carried the crisp bite of early evening, and the sky shifted from gold to lavender as the sun descended. When he reached the familiar bench, he found it empty, waiting as though it knew he would return. He sat down slowly, letting the moment settle around him. The park was quieter than usual, with only a few people scattered along the path. The distant laughter of children drifted across the field, and somewhere a dog barked playfully. It felt peaceful in a way that made Elias feel both small and deeply held. As he sat there, he reflected on his journey, not one of dramatic events, but of quiet transformations. He remembered how overwhelmed he had been the first night he came here, drowning in thoughts too loud to silence. He remembered the stranger whose gentle words had stirred something alive in him. He remembered the little boy, innocence wrapped in wisdom, holding his father's hand and telling him to tell God when your heart gets loud. And he remembered the rain, the unexpected messenger reminding him that storms don't always arrive to destroy. Sometimes they wash away what weighs you down. Elias realized then that peace hadn't arrived suddenly or easily. It had grown slowly, through trust, through honesty, through vulnerability, through letting God meet him in every storm he tried to face alone. And looking at his life now, he understood that peace was never meant to be a final destination. It was a daily choice, a returning, a soft surrender to the God who walks on stormy waters and reaches out when fear begins to sink us. The wind shifted, brushing through the trees, and Elias closed his eyes, sensing the familiar presence that had become the quiet foundation of his days. He whispered a simple prayer, not out of urgency, but out of love. Thank you for finding me where I was, and for teaching me how to breathe again. As he sat in the fading light, he felt a gentle nudge in his spirit, an invitation to take what he had learned and live it boldly. Peace wasn't meant solely for moments on a park bench. It was meant to shape conversations, decisions, reactions, relationships. It was meant to anchor him not only in calm evenings, but in chaotic mornings, challenging meetings, unexpected disruptions, and difficult relationships. Peace wasn't fragile. It was resilient. It was divine. Before he rose to leave, he noticed someone approaching from the edge of the pathway. It was the elderly man, the one who had first spoken to him weeks ago. Elias hadn't expected to see him again, and the recognition filled him with warmth. The man greeted him with a knowing smile, as though he could sense the shift in Elias's spirit without needing a single explanation. They exchanged a few gentle words, not about problems or burdens this time, but about gratitude, about growth, about the quiet way God restores what feels lost. When the man walked away, Elias felt the moment seal itself in his heart. The stranger had been there at the beginning, offering a spark of wisdom when Elias needed it most. Seeing him now felt like a reminder that God weaves people into our journey exactly when our hearts are ready to receive or to give. The sky darkened fully and stars began appearing one by one. Elias remained a moment longer, letting the night settle around him like a soft blanket. Then he rose from the bench, his footsteps steady, his heart quiet, and began walking home. Not to escape his thoughts, but carrying peace with him, ready to share it wherever he went. Life would not be perfect. Storms would come, mistakes would happen, fear would whisper, but Elias now understood something unshakable. Peace isn't found around you, it's cultivated within you. Peace isn't stolen by circumstances, it's surrendered by the heart. And when your trust rests in God, even the fiercest waves cannot pull you under. He stepped out of the park and into the soft glow of the streetlights, feeling a gratitude so deep it almost brought tears to his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he felt ready, not because he knew what tomorrow held, but because he knew who held him. Before reaching his apartment, he whispered one final thought into the quiet evening air. Whatever comes next, I won't face it alone. And with that, peace settled over him like a promise fulfilled. If this story brought peace to your heart, I invite you to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, subscribe for more reflections, and comment below with the word peace so we can pray for you.